Prologue. Ow! Stop fidgeting. It hurts. Cal squirmed, trying his best to protect the small cut just above his eye. He couldn't tell what he felt more annoyed about: the sting each time the ointment soaked rag dabbed against his forehead, the idea that Leif had to take care of him again, or the fact that Leif was seeing him be a big baby about such a tiny cut. Cal was supposed to be a grown up by now, and grown ups never showed pain. The rag in Leif's hand reeked of Lady Havisham's herbs. It tickled Cal's nose and made his eyes water each time it came close. "It's your own fault for fighting in the first place," Leif huffed. "No, it's not. Stupid Jord and his stupid friends were making fun of us again. He said we lived in the orphanage because no one wants us," Cal replied, finally able to push Leif's hand away from his forehead. Leif leaned back in his chair, the worn wood creaking under his weight. Leif wasn't a fat man. It was just that the furniture in the orphanage was so old. Guessing which was older, Leif or the orphanage, was a favorite pastime of Cal and Ovette. The orphanage had leaks, broken floors, and smelly holes, and it was always either too hot or too cold. But Leif had wrinkles around his eyes and spiky gray stubble that poked and pricked with every hug. Maybe Leif and the orphanage were the same age. The orphanage stood in the center of a large open area with streets and alleyways jutting off in all directions. Tall and awkward, it looked like a mishmash of oddly shaped buildings smushed and stacked on top of one another, uneven cubes squashed together to form 3 floors. Its presence dominated the area, looking more like a ramshackle clay castle than a home for orphans, misfits, and the odd runaway. Even the color was distinct from the other buildings around it. Streaks of white shot through the muted red clay, as if made by giant paintbrushes, the result of many hasty repairs over the years. "Not every problem needs to be punched, Cal," Leif said, giving Cal his "you're getting a lecture" look. "It wasn't my fault. I didn't start it." Cal scrunched up his face. Taking the blame again was out of the question. He'd sit there until he was blue in the face if he had to. Stupid Jord and his stupid friends. Much to Cal's relief, Leif set down the blood-speckled rag and tore away a smaller strip of cloth, placing it over Cal's cut. "Fighting is rarely the answer. Violence will only ever lead to more violence. I didn't start it." Cal hated Leif's lectures. They always made it feel like things were his fault. Why didn't Leif ever take his side? "I don't want to argue with you, Cal," Leif sighed. "Have you seen Ovette? It's getting late." "She's upstairs on your balcony, staring at the chain again. She has a headache again." "Does she now?" Leif always rubbed his stubble with a far-off look in his eye whenever Cal mentioned Ovette's headaches. It was a good thing, Cal thought. It showed he cared about them. Well, cared about Ovette, at least. That was enough for Cal. "Leif, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Cal. You can ask me anything." "Are we different? Me, Ovette, and the others?" Letting what that idiot Jord had said get to him was dumb, but maybe Jord was right. Cal didn't know which would be worse, that Jord was right about Cal and the other orphans being different, or just Jord being right. "What do you mean, different?" "We don't have parents. We don't have a real home. We don't have a real family," Cal mumbled, dropping his head. He tried to will away the tears that were already forming. He was happy Ovette wasn't here to see him getting so upset. Cal didn't allow himself to cry often. Big boys didn't cry. Still, it was hard not to sometimes. "Cal, listen to me. Leif sat on the bed next to Cal, putting his arm around him. You don't need to be related by blood to be someone's family. Family bonds run far deeper than that. They do? Cal sniffed. Of course. Answer me this. Do you love everyone here? Cal dipped his head again. His cheeks flushed. Maybe. And do they love you? I think so? Then that's all you need. As long as you have people that you love and love you back, you have a family. Cal thought about what Leif had said for a moment. Is Lady Havisham part of my family? Of course. Why wouldn't she be? Cal scrunched up his face again, crossing his arms. Juvenile indignation suited him much better than soppy feelings like love. Easier for him to process. She's mean. She's always accusing me of stealing or fighting or not doing my chores. Leif folded his arms in response, a knowing smile playing across his face. I do my chores every day. Even do Ovette's when she's not feeling or when she's feeling sick. Cal blurted out. Oh, do you? Do you steal and fight as well? Cal looked away from Leif, annoyed that he'd walked into his trap. Not every day. Leif chuckled. It was a warm, chesty chuckle, neither forgiving nor accusing. Just an old man finding the antics of youth amusing. Leif was old. There was no denying that. Maybe Cal would never find out how old he actually was, or even if he was older than the orphanage they all lived in. But no matter what, Cal loved Leif. And if what he said was true, that made Leif family. Come on, it's getting late. Leif gave Cal a pat on the back and stood, making his way toward the door. Cal pushed himself up from the bed, scurrying after Leif. Do we get a story? Cal asked. If there was one thing he looked forward to, it was Leif's stories. Brave heroes fighting armies, clever rogues dodging the Daven prefects, or a powerful giftling making her last stand against an army of inquisitors. Leif chuckled again. Do you promise no more stealing and fighting? I promise. Leif didn't reply, but raised an eyebrow and tilted his head forward. I promise I'll try? It wasn't as strong an answer, but one that was closer to the truth. Go and tell Oved it's time for bed, and I'll get a story ready. Yes! Cal pushed his way past Leif, taking the stairs to Leif's bedroom two at a time. The inside of the orphanage was just as mismatched as its exterior, its walls jutting out at weird angles. Dusty, clay-trodden rugs were spread across the floor, objects that defied Lady Havisham's unending need for cleanliness. Every inch of free space was occupied by either a chest of drawers topped with whatever trinkets the younger kids could find, or a bookshelf crammed with worn books, their cheap covers fraying at the edges. Leif always went on about the importance of good reading and being as learned as possible. Just the thought of sitting down with an old, dusty tome made Cal's eyes roll. His hands itched to be used, to make, to mend, to steal. Leif did his best to make sure Cal and the others were all good members of the community, having each of them do odd jobs for anyone who needed help. But the orphanage was the perfect training ground for any would-be thief. Plenty of cubbyholes to hide away in. To Cal, this chaos was home. It was the only real one he'd ever known. Cal found Ovette in her usual spot, sitting out on the balcony in Leif's bedroom. It offered the perfect view of both the volcano and the city of Igni, which was built up around it. A gigantic chain speared the mouth of the volcano, its links casting the whole city in shadow. The chain ran for miles and miles, stretching as far as Cal could see, eventually arching up and punching through the cloud layer, connected by some unseeable tether to the great spire that sat in the middle of the known world. Sanctum Spire, Leif had called it. Stepping out onto the balcony, Cal couldn't help but look up at the giant chain. He stared at the runes and symbols that lined each link's outer layer, every one of them glowing warm with the gift. Airships spewing trails of smoke and most likely belonging to the Davan military or some rich folk traveled close to the chain. What would it be like to be so close to something so massive? Could the people aboard those airships read the writing on the chains? Were the symbols hot or cold? Did people ever try to touch the chain? The sight of it was awe-inspiring and chilling all at once. It had a way of making Cal feel small and insignificant. He'd asked Leif time and time again what the chains were and what their purpose was, but Leif never gave him a straight answer. Either he didn't think Cal was old enough, or he just didn't know. Ovette sat with one of her hands pressed against her temple, wincing, her skin gleaming with sweat. Ever since Cal had first met her, Ovette had suffered from headaches. They didn't happen that often, but whenever they did, Ovette would only ever want to stare up at the chain. She said looking at it made her feel better, as if the chain reminded her that her problems were small and that there were things much bigger than her. But of course, things were bigger than her. She was the same age as Cal. Most things were bigger than her. Cal? Ovette said, not turning her head away from the chain above. What? Can you sit with me for a bit? Leif said we have to go back inside. It's nearly story time. Please? Just for a bit? Fine. The moment Cal sat next to her, Ovette buried her face in his shoulder, rubbing her forehead against his dirty tunic. Cal always felt helpless whenever Ovette had one of her headaches. He wanted nothing more than to be able to take them away from her. But what could he do? If it was Jord or one of the other kids making fun of them, that was a problem he could deal with, a problem he enjoyed dealing with. But a headache? How was he supposed to fight a headache? Want me to call Lady Havisham? Cal asked. No. Ovette winced again. Her body trembled against Cal's small frame. What story do you think Leif will tell us this time? Cal asked. I hope it's one about heroes and monsters again. Pride swelled in his chest at the thought of standing in defiance against an impossibly large army. And then him, bloody and victorious, while his foes lay fallen at his feet. He breathed in this make-believe victory, and for a moment, the thick swell of ash and dust from the nearby smelt mines almost smelled like the fires of glorious battle. I don't like those, Ovette mumbled. They're scary. What? Why? They're just stories. Besides, if any monsters come, I'll fight them for you. Ovette looked up at Cal, locking eyes with him. His cheeks flushed red, his skin growing warm. Promise? Of course, Cal replied, halfway between courageous and embarrassed. When I get my gift, I'll keep everyone at the orphanage safe. You'll see. Ovette pushed herself off Cal, wiping her forehead with the sleeve of her shirt. Even clothed in rags, dirty and sweat-stained, Ovette was the purest thing Cal had ever seen. She was embarrassed by her stark white hair, saying it was just one more thing that made her different from everyone else, especially compared to Cal's jet black mop, but Cal liked it. He would tell her she was lucky because most people had to try really hard to be noticed, like when vendors were giving out free food in the markets, or if a traveling merchant had special things to offer. Cal always got ignored because he looked just like every other orphan, dirty and desperate. Sounds of a scuffle in the streets below drew Cal's attention. Not an uncommon sound in the Embers district, but it was one that made Ovette flinch nonetheless. The Davins sometimes sent a patrol of prefects into the embers, looking for something. Cal wasn't sure what, but whenever they did come around, Leif always made sure Cal and Ovette were hidden. Maybe they just didn't like children. Or maybe they didn't like Leif. Or Lady Havisham. Cal! Ovette! It's time for bed, Leif called from inside. Coming, Ovette called back before turning to Cal. Come on, let's not keep Leif waiting. Yeah, I want to ask for a. Oh, I almost forgot, Cal cried, digging through his pockets. Forgot what? Cal pulled out a small patchwork coin pouch. His chest swelled again as he held out the several pieces of fabric haphazardly stitched together and tied to the top with a fraying piece of string. Your naming day present, Cal beamed, unable to stop the enormous grin spreading across his face. Ovette looked at him with a confusion that slowly shifted into sadness. Cal, I don't know when my naming day is. None of us do. I know, but that means it must have happened at some point, right? Cal shoved the coin pouch into Ovette's hands. Who's to say it wasn't today? Ovette smiled as she ran her thumb over the rough exterior, taking in all the lumps and bumps of the mismatched fabrics. Thank you, Cal. There's just one final piece left, Cal said. Open it. Ovette did as she was asked, pulling the fabric apart to create an opening at the top. Cal reached into his pocket once more and took out a single coin, scratched and dirty. He plopped it into the coin pouch, his beaming smile even more triumphant. Where did you get that? Ovette asked, her eyes wide as she stared down at the coin. I stole. Uh, Found it on the floor, Cal replied. Had a real hard time hiding it from Lady Havisham as well. Ovette stared at Cal for a moment before throwing her arms around him and drawing him in for a hug. When she finally pushed herself off him, Cal could see that the color had returned to her face somewhat, her previous headache she'd been suffering from already forgotten. Now all that remained was a toothy smile, a smile that spread warmth inside him. Her coin pouch clutched in her hands, Ovette skipped past Cal, turning back as she neared the balcony door. If it's really my naming day, then I'm going to ask Leif to tell a princess story, Ovette said with a grin, and then bounded inside. No! I hate princess stories, Cal moaned, rushing after Ovette.